I never imagined that accepting that job would change not only my bank account, but also my heart. And I definitely didn't expect that the most feared man in town would be capable of making gardens bloom, especially mine. Clementine Ashworth nearly choked on her coffee when she saw the amount on the crumpled paper that had just been delivered by a man in an impeccable suit. "Excuse me, how many zeros are those?" she asked, blinking several times as if the numbers would disappear. $12,000 per month, miss," the man repeated, adjusting his glasses with an almost comical seriousness. "Plus benefits, housing included, and a generous annual bonus." Clementine looked around her tiny New York apartment, where plants competed for space with piles of overdue bills. Her best friend, Magnolia Rivers, stopped painting her emerald green nails to observe the scene with interest. "This is for taking care of plants?" Clementine insisted, still incredulous. "The gardens of Thornfield Manor, precisely. Mr. Blackthorne is particular about the care of his property." Magnolia almost knocked over the nail polish bottle. "Blackthorne? As in Atticus Blackthorne? The guy everyone says is an eccentric recluse with dark tendencies, yes," the man completed, impassive. "Miss Ashworth, the gentleman was very specific. He wants someone with your unique experience with plants considered impossible to cultivate." Clementine frowned. It was true that she had a special talent for resurrecting dying plants, but how did he know about that? How did he find out about me? "The gentleman has his research methods," he replied evasively. "I need an answer by 9 tomorrow morning." As soon as the door closed, Magnolia exploded. "Clem, you can't be considering this. That manor is cursed. They say no one who enters there comes out the same way." "Maggie, look around me." Clementine gestured dramatically. "I'm 27 years old. I live in an apartment that looks more like a broom closet, and my greatest professional achievement was bringing a dead cactus back to life. What's the worst that could happen? You could become a ghost." "At least I'd be a well-paid ghost." Clementine laughed, but her heart raced when she thought about the stories surrounding Atticus Blackthorne. They said he was too young to have inherited so much money honestly. Some whispered about shady business dealings, others about a family tragedy that had turned him into a hermit. What everyone agreed on was that he was handsome as sin and dangerous as a storm. "You have that look," Magnolia accused. "What look?" "The look of, I'm going to do something completely insane because life is boring." Clementine picked up the paper and reread the amount. $12,000. She could pay off all her debts in 6 months, help her retired parents, maybe even go back to studying botany like she'd always dreamed. "You know what?" she said, surprising herself with her own determination. "I'm going to accept it." "Clementine Ashworth." "What? It's just gardening. What can he do? Attack me with a watering can?" Magnolia stared at her with an expression that mixed admiration and despair. "Promise me you'll keep your phone always charged. And if in a week you don't answer my texts, I'm going there to rescue you with a rescue team." "Promised." Clementine laughed, but a small part of her wondered if she wasn't making the biggest mistake of her life. That night, while packing her few belongings, she found the business card the man had left. Thick paper, golden embossed letters. "Thornfield Estate, where gardens keep secrets and hearts find home." What a strange slogan, she murmured, but felt an inexplicable shiver run down her spine. Outside, a storm was forming on the horizon, and Clementine couldn't decide if it was a bad omen or the harbinger of something extraordinary. Maybe both. The next morning, promptly at 9, she called the number on the card. "I accept the proposal," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Excellent, Miss Ashworth. A car will pick you up at 3 in the afternoon. Bring only the essentials. Everything else will be provided." And so, with her heart beating like an out-of-tune drum and a small suitcase full of hopes and terrors, Clementine Ashworth prepared to discover that sometimes the most haunted places can hide the most precious treasures. What she didn't know was that at that exact moment on the other side of the city, Atticus Blackthorne was at the top of his tower, observing the wild gardens of his property and thinking that maybe, finally, someone could bring life back to that place. And maybe, just maybe, to his own life as well. I expected a haunted mansion. What I got was paradise with an attitude problem. And a gardener's worst nightmare. The black sedan that picked up Clementine looked like it belonged in a funeral procession, which didn't help calm her already frayed nerves. The driver, a stern-faced man named Jefferson Parker, hadn't said more than 3 words during the entire 2-hour journey to the Hudson Valley. "We're here, miss," he announced as they passed through towering iron gates that looked like they could withstand a zombie apocalypse. Clementine pressed her nose against the window and gasped. Thornfield Manor wasn't just a house, it was a Gothic masterpiece that seemed to have jumped straight out of a Victorian novel. Ivy crawled up the dark stone walls like nature's own graffiti, and gargoyles perched on the corners as if they were gossiping about the new arrival. But it was the gardens that made her heart skip a beat. Or rather, what had once been gardens. "Oh my God," she whispered, stepping out of the car. What stretched before her was botanical chaos. Overgrown hedges twisted into impossible shapes, flower beds choked with weeds, and a maze that looked like it hadn't seen pruning shears in decades. It was beautiful in the most heartbreaking way, like watching a symphony orchestra where every musician was playing a different song. "Miss Ashworth, I presume?" Clementine spun around to find a woman in her 50s approaching. She had silver hair pulled into a perfect bun, and the kind of posture that screamed, former ballet dancer turned strict governess. "I'm Mrs. Cordelia Blackwood, the estate manager. Welcome to Thornfield." "It's impressive," Clementine managed, still staring at the botanical disaster around them. Mrs. Blackwood's lips curved into what might have been a smile if you squinted. "Mr. Blackthorne is in meetings today, but he's eager to discuss your mission. Come, let me show you to your quarters." They walked through gardens that made Clementine's fingers itch with the urge to start pruning immediately. A fountain stood in the center courtyard, its cherub statue green with moss and surrounded by roses that had grown so wild they looked like they were plotting a takeover. "How long has it been like this?" she asked, dodging a particularly aggressive rose bush. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Mrs. Blackwood replied with startling precision. "Not that anyone's counting." "What happened to the previous gardener?" Mrs. Blackwood paused, her expression unreadable. "Let's just say that Mr. Blackthorne can be particular about his privacy. The last few gardeners found his requirements too demanding." "Demanding how?" "He prefers to work at night, doesn't like interruptions, has very specific ideas about which plants should go where, the usual eccentric millionaire quirks." They reached a charming cottage nestled between 2 enormous oak trees. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, complete with a red door and window boxes that currently housed what appeared to be the world's most depressed petunias. "This will be your home," Mrs. Blackwood said, handing her an old-fashioned skeleton key. "Dinner is at 7 in the main house. Mr. Blackthorne dines alone, but the staff eats in the kitchen. Lovely people, once you get used to their peculiarities." "What kind of peculiarities?" "Oh, the usual. Our chef, Marco Delacroix, only cooks while humming opera. The housekeeper, Ruby Washington, insists the house is haunted and leaves cookies out for the ghosts. And our groundskeeper, old Pete Murphy, claims he can talk to plants." "Can he actually talk to plants?" Mrs. Blackwood's eyes twinkled with mischief. "You'll have to ask them yourself." As the estate manager walked away, Clementine pushed open the cottage door and gasped again. The interior was straight out of a design magazine. Exposed beams, a stone fireplace, built-in bookshelves, and windows that overlooked the wild gardens. On the kitchen counter, she found a welcome basket filled with gourmet treats and a bottle of wine with a note. "Welcome to Thornfield. I hope you'll find what you're looking for here. The gardens are waiting. A.B." "A.B." she murmured, tracing the elegant handwriting. "Atticus Blackthorne." Something about the note made her stomach flutter in a way that had nothing to do with the long car ride. There was something almost lonely about those carefully chosen words. Her phone buzzed with a text from Magnolia. "Still alive? Or should I start planning your memorial service? I'm thinking sunflowers and dramatic readings." Clementine laughed and quickly typed back, Still breathing. The place is incredible, like Beauty and the Beast, but with more weeds. Please tell me the Beast is at least hot. Haven't seen him yet, but his handwriting is sexy. Clementine Ashworth, did you just call handwriting sexy? Before she could respond, a knock at her door interrupted the conversation. She opened it to find a mountain of a man with gentle eyes and dirt under his fingernails. You must be the new gardener, he said in a thick Irish accent. I'm Pete Murphy. Been taking care of what I can around here, but these gardens, they need someone with a special touch. Nice to meet you, Pete. I'm Clementine. Mrs. Blackwood mentioned you talk to plants? Pete's weather-beaten face broke into a grin. Aye, that I do. And right now they're all saying the same thing. Which is? They're asking when the real gardener is finally going to show up. Clementine raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? Oh, not you, lass. You're the one who's going to wake them up, but the master of the house? He used to be out here every night working with his hands in the soil. Haven't seen him in the garden since everything went to hell. What happened? Pete's expression darkened. That's not my story to tell. But I'll say this. These gardens are dying of a broken heart. And maybe, just maybe, you're here to fix more than just the flowers. As Pete ambled away, Clementine stood in her doorway, looking out at the untamed beauty surrounding her cottage. Somewhere in that maze of overgrown dreams was a mystery waiting to be solved. And somewhere in the shadowy towers of Thornfield Manor was a man who had once loved these gardens enough to tend them with his own hands. She had a feeling that bringing this place back to life was going to require more than just pruning shears and plant food. It was going to require healing whatever had broken Atticus Blackthorn's heart. They say you should never judge a book by its cover. But when that cover looks like a romance novel hero and catches you talking to roses at midnight, all bets are off. Clementine couldn't sleep. It wasn't just the unfamiliar creaks and sighs of the old cottage, or the way moonlight painted eerie shadows through her windows. It was the gardens. They seemed to be calling to her, whispering secrets she couldn't quite understand. At 11:47 p.m., she gave up on sleep entirely. Slipping into jeans and a Stanford University sweatshirt, her one memento from dreams of graduate school, she grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the night. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted like nature's own security alarm. Okay, ladies, she whispered to a cluster of neglected rose bushes, crouching down with her flashlight. Let's see what's going on here. The roses were in rough shape, but not beyond saving. Someone had planted them with care. The spacing was perfect. The variety selection showed real knowledge. But years of neglect had left them tangled and wild. You're not sick, she murmured, gently examining a stem. You're just heartbroken. Talking to plants already? Most people wait at least a week before they start losing their minds here. Clementine shrieked and spun around so fast she nearly fell into the rosebush. Her flashlight beam swept wildly before landing on a figure standing about 10 feet away. Even in the dim light, she could tell three things immediately. First, he was tall. Second, he was definitely not a serial killer. Serial killers probably didn't wear expensive-looking sweaters. Third, he was absolutely devastatingly gorgeous in that brooding, dangerous way that made sensible women do incredibly stupid things. Are you trying to give me a heart attack? She gasped, pressing a hand to her racing chest. If I were, I'd have better methods than sneaking up on someone in my own garden, he replied, and there was something almost amused in his voice. I'm Atticus Blackthorn, and you're trespassing on my roses. Your roses? Clementine stood up, trying to regain some dignity, despite the fact that she probably had dirt on her knees and twigs in her hair. I'm Clementine Ashworth. Your new gardener? The one you hired to fix this beautiful disaster? He stepped closer and the moonlight revealed sharp cheekbones, dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it, and eyes that seemed to hold secrets. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, and there was something almost vulnerable about the way he studied her. You're smaller than I imagined, he said finally. I'm sorry, what? Clementine blinked. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, Commenting on her height wasn't one of them. The previous gardeners were all larger men. I assumed anyone willing to take on this project would need to be substantial. Are you calling me insubstantial? She asked, torn between offense and amusement. I'm saying you don't look like someone who could wrestle 30 acres of overgrown gardens into submission. Clementine straightened to her full 5'4". Mr. Blackthorn, I once brought a century plant back from the dead using nothing but determination and plant food. I taught urban gardening to teenagers in Brooklyn who thought vegetables came exclusively from corner stores. And I spent last summer turning a condemned lot in Queens into a community garden that now feeds 40 families. Size isn't everything. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe even respect. Show me. What? Show me what you see when you look at my gardens. This wasn't how she'd imagined their first meeting, but Clementine had never been one to back down from a challenge. She gestured toward the rose garden around them. These roses were planted by someone who understood companion planting. See how they're positioned near the lavender? That's not accidental. And the way they're arranged, it's meant to create a color progression from deep red through pink to white. It would have been stunning when it was maintained. She moved to another section, her nervousness forgotten in the face of her passion. This area here was designed as a cutting garden. Peonies, delphiniums, hollyhocks, all the classic cottage garden flowers. And over there, she pointed toward a shadowy area. That's meant to be a moon garden, isn't it? White flowers that bloom at night. Atticus had gone very still. How do you know about the moon garden? The plant choices: night-blooming cereus, moonflower, white nicotiana. Someone planned this to be beautiful in the dark. Someone who spent a lot of time out here at night. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, loaded with questions Clementine didn't know how to ask. You did this, didn't you? She said quietly. You designed all of this. A long time ago, he said, his voice rough. Before I remembered that beautiful things don't last. They do if you take care of them. Not everything can be saved, Miss Ashworth. You'd be surprised what can come back with the right attention, Mr. Blackthorn. They were standing closer now, though Clementine couldn't remember either of them moving. She could see the pain in his eyes, old and deep, and her heart did something stupid and dangerous. It decided it wanted to heal whatever had hurt him. I should go, she said, suddenly aware that she was standing in a moonlit garden with a mysterious millionaire, wearing her rattiest sweatshirt and probably looking like she'd been wrestling with shrubbery, which, technically, she had been. Clementine, he said as she started to turn away, and the way he said her name made her stomach flip. The gardens, they haven't had anyone who understood them in a very long time. I hope you'll be patient with them. They're not used to being cared for anymore. Are we still talking about the gardens? The question slipped out before she could stop it, and she immediately wanted to crawl under the nearest bush. But Atticus smiled, actually smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Good night, Miss Ashworth. Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow I'll show you the real challenge. As he walked away, dissolving back into the shadows like some sort of Gothic hero, Clementine stood frozen in the rose garden, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was in so much trouble. Back in her cottage, she grabbed her phone and texted Magnolia. Emergency. I think I'm developing feelings for my boss and I've been here less than 24 hours. The response came immediately. On a scale of 1 to 10, how hot is he? Magnolia, this is serious. So is my question. Scale of 1 to 10. Clementine groaned and typed back. 11. Oh honey, you are so screwed. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Clementine's last thought was that Magnolia was absolutely right. She was completely, utterly, hopelessly screwed, and she was already looking forward to tomorrow's real challenge. Some challenges test your skills, others test your heart. And then there are the ones that make you question everything you thought you knew about love, loss, and the power of growing things back to life. Clementine woke up to the smell of bacon and the sound of operatic humming. Following the delicious aroma, She found herself in Thornfield's sprawling kitchen, where a man in his 40s was conducting an invisible orchestra while flipping pancakes. "You must be our new miracle worker," he announced in a melodious voice tinged with a French accent. "I am Marco Delacroix, and I have prepared a breakfast fit for someone about to do the impossible." The impossible? Clementine accepted a plate piled high with fluffy pancakes and perfectly crispy bacon. "Cherie, you are about to attempt something that has made 3 grown men quit and 1 woman transfer to Alaska." Marco gestured dramatically with his spatula. "The master's special project." Before Clementine could ask what he meant, Mrs. Blackwood appeared with military precision. "Miss Ashworth, I trust you slept well. Mr. Blackthorne is waiting for you in the conservatory. Finish your breakfast, but don't dawdle. He's not known for his patience." 20 minutes later, Clementine found herself standing before massive glass doors that opened onto what could only be described as botanical paradise. The conservatory was enormous, filled with tropical plants that created a jungle-like atmosphere. Orchids cascaded from hanging baskets, exotic palms reached toward the glass ceiling, and the air was thick with humidity and the perfume of blooming gardenias. Impressive, isn't it? Atticus emerged from behind a towering bird of paradise plant, and Clementine's breath caught. In daylight, he was even more devastating, tall and lean, with an easy grace that suggested he was comfortable in his own skin, despite the shadows in his dark eyes. "It's incredible," she managed. "You built all this?" "My ex-fiancée did, actually. Vivian Sterling. She was passionate about tropical plants." His voice carried a bitter edge that made Clementine's stomach clench. This conservatory was going to be her wedding gift. Was? The word slipped out before Clementine could stop it. Atticus's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "She decided 3 weeks before our wedding that she preferred the tropical climate of Monaco, with my former business partner, and half my assets." Oh, Clementine felt her heart squeeze painfully. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be. It was 3 years ago. Ancient history." He moved deeper into the conservatory, clearly wanting to change the subject. "The problem is, without Vivian's expertise, this place has become a disaster. Half the plants are dying, the others are taking over. I need someone to restore it to its former glory." Clementine followed him through the jungle-like space, her trained eye immediately cataloging problems. Overwatering here, underwatering there, plants in completely wrong locations for their light needs. But underneath the chaos, she could see the bones of something spectacular. "Why is this so important to you?" she asked, gently touching a struggling orchid. If it was hers. "Because I'm not letting her destroy everything she touched," Atticus said with quiet intensity. "This conservatory was beautiful once. It can be beautiful again. Different, but beautiful." Something in his voice made Clementine look at him more carefully. This wasn't just about plants. This was about healing, about proving that broken things could be fixed, that abandoned dreams could bloom again. "Okay," she said firmly. "But I have conditions." Atticus raised an eyebrow. "You're making demands now?" "Call them professional requirements. First, I need complete creative control. No hovering, no second-guessing, no, but Vivian always did it this way. Second, some of these plants need to go. I know that might be hard, but—" "Get rid of whatever you need to get rid of," he interrupted. "I trust your judgment." The simple statement hit her like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had said they trusted her judgment? Certainly not her ex-boyfriend Derek, who had criticized everything from her career choices to her houseplant arrangements. "Third," she continued, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest, "I work better with music." "Is that okay?" "What kind of music?" "Mostly classic rock. Sometimes jazz when I'm repotting." The plants seemed to like John Coltrane. For the first time since she'd met him, Atticus laughed, really laughed, and the sound was warm and rich and did dangerous things to her equilibrium. "Plants that appreciate jazz. I should have known you'd be unconventional." They spent the next hour walking through the conservatory, and Clementine found herself relaxing as they discussed plant care. Atticus clearly knew more about gardening than he let on, asking intelligent questions and making suggestions that showed real understanding. "You designed the original layout, didn't you?" she asked as they examined a section of struggling bromeliads. "Some of it," he admitted. "Vivian had the vision, but I did the structural planning. Turns out I'm better with frameworks than I am with feeling." "I don't think that's true. You barely know me, Clementine. I know you've kept this place running for 3 years even though it hurts to look at it. I know you still come out to the rose garden at midnight because you can't quite let go of something you created. And I know you hired me because you want to believe beautiful things can be saved." She turned to face him fully. "That doesn't sound like someone who's bad with feeling." Atticus went very still, and for a moment, Clementine thought she'd overstepped. But then he smiled, soft and real and utterly devastating. "You're dangerous, you know that?" "Me? I'm just a gardener." "No," he said, moving closer. "You're someone who sees possibility where everyone else sees problems. That's the most dangerous kind of person there is." They were standing close enough that Clementine could see gold flecks in his dark eyes, could smell his cologne mixed with the green scent of growing things. Her heart was doing acrobatics, and she was pretty sure her face was the color of the hibiscus blooming nearby. "I should," she started. "Mr. Blackthorne." Mrs. Blackwood's voice cut through the moment like a machete through morning glory. "Your conference call with Tokyo is in 5 minutes." The spell broke, and Atticus stepped back, his expression closing off like shutters slamming shut. "I'll leave you to assess the situation," he said. "All business again. Let Mrs. Blackwood know what supplies you need." As he walked away, Clementine slumped against a nearby palm tree and tried to catch her breath. This was supposed to be about gardening, about plants and soil, and bringing life back to neglected growing things. It was not supposed to be about the way her pulse raced when Atticus Blackthorne smiled at her. Her phone buzzed. "Status report, any swooning yet?" Clementine looked around the tropical paradise, thought about dark eyes and dangerous smiles, and typed back, "Maggie, I think I'm falling for a man who's still in love with his ex-fiancée's memory." "Oh, honey, that's either going to be the most romantic thing ever or a complete disaster. Why can't it be both?" As she started making notes about which plants to relocate, Clementine couldn't shake the feeling that healing this conservatory was going to require more than just horticultural expertise. It was going to require teaching a wounded heart how to bloom again. They say the best relationships grow slowly like perennials. But sometimes when the conditions are just right, even the most careful gardener finds herself in the middle of something that blooms faster than she ever imagined possible. 3 weeks into her tenure at Thornfield, Clementine had fallen into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Mornings in the conservatory, afternoons tackling the outdoor gardens, and evenings researching plant varieties and creating detailed restoration plans. What she hadn't expected was how often those plans were interrupted by a certain brooding millionaire. Atticus had taken to appearing at random moments, sometimes with coffee and intelligent questions about soil pH, sometimes just watching her work with an intensity that made her hands shake and her concentration scatter like dandelion seeds in the wind. Today was no different. She was knee-deep in replanting a section of the rose garden when his shadow fell across her work. "You're humming," he observed, settling onto the stone bench nearby. "Am I?" Clementine looked up, pushing a wayward curl out of her face and probably leaving a streak of dirt in the process. "Sorry, I don't realize I'm doing it." "Don't apologize, it's nice." "What song?" "Come on, Eileen." "Dexy's Midnight Runners. My dad used to play it while we worked in our garden back home in Vermont." She smiled at the memory. "He said plants grow better with good music and terrible singing." "And do they?" "Well, these roses haven't complained yet," she said, gesturing to the bushes that were already showing signs of renewed health. "Though they might have different taste in music than my dad did." Atticus was quiet for a moment, watching her gentle hands as she worked soil around a newly planted rose bush. "Tell me about your family." The question surprised her. Over the past weeks, their conversations had centered on plants. garden design, and the occasional debate about whether jazz really did make orchids bloom more prolifically. Personal topics were uncharted territory. "Nothing too exciting," she said, sitting back on her heels. "My parents are retired teachers. They have this amazing cottage garden in a small town where everyone knows everyone's business, and the biggest scandal in recent memory was when Mrs. Henderson's prized delphiniums were mysteriously moved 6 inches to the left." Sounds peaceful. It was, maybe too peaceful. I always felt like I was meant for something bigger, which is ironic, considering I ended up talking to plants for a living. "There's nothing small about what you do," Atticus said quietly. "You bring things back to life." Something in his voice made her look at him more carefully. He was watching her with that intense expression again, the one that made her feel like he was seeing something she wasn't even aware she was showing. "What about your family?" she asked, then immediately worried she'd overstepped. "Sorry, you don't have to. My parents died in a car accident when I was 22, he said matter-of-factly. I inherited everything. The business, this house, more money than anyone should have at that age. I threw myself into work, made more money, bought bigger houses. I thought I was building something meaningful. But you can't build a life out of just things." Vivian helped me realize that, or at least I thought she did. His laugh was bitter. Turns out she was more interested in the things than the life. Clementine's chest ached for him. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "You didn't steal half my company and run off to Monaco. I'm sorry that someone made you think love was about what you could provide instead of who you are." Atticus went very still, and Clementine realized she'd said something far more revealing than she'd intended. She turned back to her roses, her cheeks burning. "Clementine," he said softly. "I should finish this section before the rain comes in," she said quickly, not looking at him. But instead of leaving, Atticus stood up and moved closer. "Here, let me help." "You don't have to." "I want to." He knelt beside her in the dirt, his expensive pants apparently not a concern, and held a rose bush steady while she worked soil around its roots. They worked in comfortable silence, their hands occasionally brushing as they passed tools back and forth. "This variety," Atticus said, examining a deep red bloom. "I don't remember planting these." "That's because they're new. David Austin roses, bred for disease resistance and repeat blooming. They'll give you color from spring through fall." She glanced at him sideways. "I may have taken some liberties with your original design." "Good," he said firmly. "The original design was created by someone who thought she knew what I needed. I trust your judgment more than I ever trusted hers." The simple statement hit Clementine like a lightning bolt. There was something raw and honest in his voice, something that suggested he was talking about more than just roses. "Atticus," she started, then stopped as rain began to fall in fat, warm drops. "Conservatory," he said, standing and pulling her to her feet. "Now, before we get soaked." They ran through the gardens, laughing as the rain picked up, arriving at the conservatory breathless and dripping. Clementine's hair had escaped its ponytail entirely, and Atticus's usually perfect appearance was charmingly disheveled. "You have dirt," he said, reaching up to touch her cheek. "Right here." His thumb brushed across her skin, gentle and warm, and suddenly the air between them was charged with more than just the approaching storm. Clementine's breath caught as his eyes dropped to her lips. "Clementine," he murmured, and she could see the exact moment he decided to kiss her. But before he could close the distance between them, the conservatory door burst open, and Ruby Washington, the housekeeper, stumbled in with an armload of clean towels. "Oh!" Ruby stopped short, her eyes going wide as she took in the scene. "I was just... rain." She thrust the towels at them and backed toward the door. "I'll just... Ghosts don't like wet floors. Very slippery for floating." As Ruby fled, Clementine and Atticus stared at each other, the moment broken but the tension still crackling between them like electricity. "I should..." Clementine started. "Yes," Atticus agreed quickly. "You should." But neither of them moved. They stood there dripping and staring and both clearly thinking about what had almost happened. "Tomorrow," Atticus said finally, "I'd like to show you something. The place where I first learned to love gardening." "Okay," Clementine managed, her voice barely above a whisper. As she walked back to her cottage through the rain, her heart was doing complicated gymnastics routines in her chest. She was falling for him. Hard, fast, completely. And from the way he'd looked at her in the conservatory, she was starting to think maybe, just maybe, he was falling too. Her phone buzzed with a text from Magnolia. "Update. Is he still emotionally unavailable? Or are we making progress?" Clementine looked back at Thornfield Manor, where warm light glowed in the windows and she could just make out Atticus's silhouette in the conservatory. "Progress," she typed back. "Definitely progress. Define progress." "He almost kissed me in the conservatory." "Clementine Ashworth, I am getting in my car right now to demand details." "Don't you dare, but, Maggie, I think I'm in love with him." "Oh, honey, are you sure?" Clementine touched her cheek where his thumb had brushed away the dirt, where she could still feel the warmth of his touch. "Yeah, I'm sure." "Then you better make sure he knows it. Some flowers need extra encouragement to bloom." As Clementine fell asleep that night, she smiled at Magnolia's words. Tomorrow, Atticus was going to show her where his love of gardening began. Maybe it was time to plant some seeds of her own. Some secrets are buried so deep, you need more than a shovel to uncover them. Sometimes you need trust, patience, and someone brave enough to get their hands dirty digging through the layers of a guarded heart. The next morning, Atticus was waiting for her with 2 steaming coffee mugs and an expression that was equal parts nervous and determined. "Ready for that field trip?" he asked, handing her a mug filled with what smelled like heaven mixed with caffeine. "Should I be worried?" Clementine asked, noting that he'd traded his usual expensive clothes for jeans and a simple blue sweater that made his eyes look like storm clouds. "Probably," he said with a smile that was both boyish and devastating. "We're going off the beaten path." They walked through the estate grounds, past the formal gardens and into an area Clementine hadn't explored yet. The path was overgrown, winding through a small forest of ancient oaks and maples that created a canopy so thick it felt like walking through a green cathedral. "How long since you've been back here?" she asked, noting how Atticus seemed to know the way despite the overgrown path. 3 years, 2 months, and, let's say, too many days," he replied, echoing Mrs. Blackwood's earlier precision about the garden's neglect. After about 10 minutes of walking, they emerged into a clearing that made Clementine gasp. In the center was a small weathered greenhouse, its glass panels cloudy with age and neglect. But around it, "Oh my God," she whispered. It was a wild garden but not chaotic like the main estate. This felt intentional, like nature and design had conspired to create something magical. Climbing roses cascaded over an old arbor, herbs had naturalized into fragrant carpets, and fruit trees heavy with apples and pears created dappled shade over moss-covered stone paths. "This is where it all started," Atticus said quietly. "My grandmother's garden. She raised me after my parents died, and this was her sanctuary. She taught me that gardens aren't just about making things beautiful. They're about creating life, fostering growth, healing what's broken." "It's incredible," Clementine breathed, moving toward the greenhouse. She must have been an amazing woman. She was. Iris Blackthorn was barely 5 feet tall, but she could make anything grow, including stubborn, angry 22-year-olds who thought the world owed them something. Clementine turned to look at him, seeing vulnerability in his expression that made her chest tight. "What happened to her?" "Cancer, when I was 25. She left me everything, including advice I was too proud to take at the time." He joined her at the greenhouse door, pulling an old key from his pocket. "She told me that love was like gardening. It required patience, attention, and the faith that even in the darkest seasons, something beautiful could grow." The greenhouse door opened with a protest of old hinges, and they stepped into a space that felt frozen in time. Clay pots lined wooden shelves, dried herbs hung from the rafters. and an old potting bench held tools that looked like they'd been waiting patiently for their gardener to return. She also said, Atticus continued, running his fingers along the old potting bench, that I'd know I'd found the right person when they could see the potential in something everyone else had given up on. Clementine's heart stopped beating for approximately 3 seconds. Atticus, I brought Vivian here once, he said, not looking at her. She hated it. Said it was creepy and depressing, that I should tear it down and build something modern. She couldn't understand why I'd want to preserve something so broken. But it's not broken, Clementine said fiercely, moving closer to him. It's just waiting. All this needs is someone who can see what it was meant to be. That's what I told her. She said I was being sentimental about junk. She was wrong. Was she? He finally looked at her, and the raw pain in his eyes nearly undid her. Maybe I am just a sentimental fool who holds on to things that should be thrown away. Atticus Blackthorne, Clementine said, stepping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look at him properly. You are not junk. This place is not junk. And anyone who can't see the beauty in something that's survived, that's endured, that's ready to bloom again with just a little love and attention, well, that person doesn't deserve gardens. Or you. For a moment, they stood there in the dusty greenhouse light, the air between them charged with everything they hadn't said. Then Atticus reached up and cupped her face in his hands. Clementine, he said, her name a prayer and a question all at once. Yes, she whispered, not even sure what she was agreeing to, just knowing that whatever he was asking, her answer was yes. This time, when he leaned down to kiss her, there was no Ruby with towels, no phone calls from Tokyo, no interruptions at all. Just the soft press of his lips against hers, gentle at first, then deeper when she melted against him with a soft sigh that made him groan low in his throat. It was a perfect first kiss, sweet and desperate and full of all the emotion they'd been dancing around for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clementine felt like every flower in the abandoned garden had suddenly burst into bloom. I've wanted to do that since the night I found you talking to my roses, Atticus admitted, resting his forehead against hers. Just since then? She teased, still dizzy from the kiss. Well, I've wanted to do it more since then, he corrected with a smile that was pure sunshine. Much more. So what stopped you? His expression grew serious. Fear, mostly. Fear that I'd ruin something beautiful again. Fear that I'd care too much and lose everything. Fear that someone as vibrant and alive as you couldn't possibly want someone as broken as me. Atticus, she said, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. I don't see you as broken. I see you as someone who's been through something terrible and came out the other side with the capacity to love even more deeply. Do you know how rare that is? I'm beginning to, he murmured, and kissed her again, softer this time, like he was savoring it. When they finally made their way back to the main house, hand in hand and both grinning like teenagers, they found Pete Murphy waiting by the rose garden with a knowing smirk. About time, he said without preamble. The roses have been placing bets on when you two would figure it out. The roses have been what now? Clementine laughed. Smart flowers, these ones. They know chemistry when they see it. Pete winked at Atticus. Your grandmother would be pleased, lad. She always said this place needed someone who could see magic in the ordinary. That evening, as they sat on the cottage porch sharing takeout Chinese food and planning the restoration of Iris's garden, Clementine's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Magnolia. I have to take this, she told Atticus apologetically. She's been threatening to drive up here with reinforcements if I don't check in. Clementine Grace Ashworth, Magnolia's voice came through loud and clear. You have exactly 30 seconds to tell me everything before I assume you've been murdered by a hot millionaire and call the FBI. I'm fine, Maggie. Better than fine, actually. Define better than fine. Clementine looked at Atticus, who was trying very hard to pretend he wasn't listening while clearly hanging on every word. He kissed me, she said softly. Finally. How was it? Maggie. Scale of 1 to 10, how earth-shattering. Clementine met Atticus's amused eyes and felt her cheeks burn. 12. Clementine Ashworth, you are officially living in a romance novel and I am so jealous I could cry. When's the wedding? Magnolia. I'm just saying, when a man takes you to his grandmother's secret garden and kisses you among the heirloom roses, that's some serious proposal-level romantic intent right there. As Clementine sputtered denials, Atticus laughed, rich and warm and completely unguarded, and she realized that for the first time since she'd known him, he looked truly, completely happy. Maybe Magnolia wasn't entirely wrong about the romance novel thing, and maybe that wasn't such a terrible fate after all. Just when you think you found your happily ever after, life has a way of reminding you that even the most beautiful gardens have seasons. And sometimes winter comes when you least expect it. 3 blissful weeks had passed since the kiss that changed everything. Clementine had never been happier, working side by side with Atticus to restore his grandmother's garden, stealing kisses between the tomato plants, and falling deeper in love with both the man and the magical world he'd shared with her. Which was why the black sedan pulling up the circular drive on a Tuesday morning felt like an ominous cloud blocking out the sun. Clementine was repotting orchids in the conservatory when she heard voices. Atticus's low rumble and a woman's laugh that sounded like champagne and broken promises. Her blood turned to ice water. Darling, you haven't changed a bit. The voice purred, carrying through the glass walls with crystal clarity. Though I must say the grounds look rustic, very authentic wilderness chic. Clementine pressed herself against a pillar, hidden behind a massive bird of paradise, and peered through the foliage. There, standing in the doorway like she owned the place, was the most beautiful woman Clementine had ever seen. Tall, elegant, with platinum blonde hair that probably cost more than Clementine's monthly salary, wearing a white designer dress that screamed money and sophistication. Vivian Sterling. It had to be. What are you doing here, Vivian? Atticus's voice was carefully controlled, but Clementine could hear the tension underneath. Is that any way to greet an old friend? Vivian stepped closer, her manicured hand touching his arm with practiced familiarity. I was in the city and thought I'd drop by. For closure, you understand. Monaco was educational, but I've realized some mistakes simply can't be undone. Some mistakes shouldn't be undone, Atticus replied. But he didn't step away from her touch, and Clementine's heart cracked like drought-stricken soil. Oh, darling, don't be bitter, it doesn't suit you. Vivian's laugh was melodic and sharp. I heard through the grapevine that you've hired a new gardener. Some little local girl? How quaint. Clementine felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. Little local girl. The dismissive tone made her feel exactly as small as Vivian intended. Clementine is not quaint, Atticus said firmly, and hope flickered in Clementine's chest. She's talented, intelligent, and I'm sure she's lovely for what she is, Vivian interrupted smoothly. But darling, surely you can see this little gardening fantasy for what it is? A rebound, a way to convince yourself you've moved on. Her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried perfectly. We both know you could never love someone like that the way you loved me. Not really. The silence stretched like a taut wire, and Clementine held her breath, waiting for Atticus to defend what they had, to tell Vivian she was wrong, to choose love over the sophisticated poison standing in front of him. Instead, he said quietly, "She's not you." 3 words that could mean everything or nothing, but in the context of Vivian's presence, they felt like a dagger between Clementine's ribs. No, Vivian agreed, triumph clear in her voice. She's not. And we both know that's not what you really want, is it? Not deep down. You want someone who challenges you, who matches your ambition, who can stand beside you in your world instead of playing in the dirt. Clementine couldn't take any more. She slipped out the back of the conservatory and ran, through the gardens to her cottage, tears blurring her vision and making her stumble over the very paths she'd helped restore. Inside the safety of her little sanctuary, she collapsed onto her couch and let the sobs come. All those weeks of growing closer, of believing she could be enough for someone like Atticus Blackthorne, and it had taken exactly 5 minutes of Vivian's presence to remind her of the truth. She was just the gardener, a temporary distraction, a rebound. Her phone buzzed with a text from Magnolia. "How's Paradise today, still living the dream?" With shaking fingers, Clementine typed back, "The dream just became a nightmare. His ex-fiancée showed up." The phone rang immediately. "Clementine, honey, talk to me." Magnolia's voice was fierce with protective love. "What happened?" Between hiccuping sobs, Clementine told her everything: Vivian's arrival, the cruel dismissal, Atticus's silence when it mattered most. "That absolute witch?" Magnolia snarled. "And Atticus didn't defend you?" "He said I wasn't her," Clementine whispered. "And he's right. I'm not sophisticated or worldly or any of the things a man like him needs. I'm just me." "Just you? Just you?" Magnolia's voice rose to a pitch that probably scared small animals. "Clementine Grace Ashworth, you are brilliant, talented, beautiful, and kind. You brought a dead cactus back to life. You turned a condemned lot into a community garden. You made a broken man remember how to love. If he can't see that you're worth 1,000 plastic society bitches, then he doesn't deserve you." "But maybe she's right," Clementine said miserably. "Maybe this was all just fantasy. Maybe I was just convenient. Stop that right now. Don't let that woman poison what you know in your heart is real." A soft knock at her door interrupted the conversation. Clementine's heart leaped. Maybe it was Atticus coming to explain, to tell her Vivian's words meant nothing. "I have to go," she told Magnolia. "Someone's here." But when she opened the door, it wasn't Atticus. It was Mrs. Blackwood, holding a steaming mug and wearing an expression of maternal concern. "I thought you might need some tea," the older woman said gently. "And perhaps some perspective." "Did you see her?" Clementine asked, stepping aside to let Mrs. Blackwood in. "I saw her. And I saw the way Master Atticus looked like he'd been hit by lightning. Not in a good way." Mrs. Blackwood settled onto the couch and patted the cushion beside her. "Sit, dear. Let me tell you something about that woman." Clementine curled up beside her, accepting the warm mug gratefully. "Vivian Sterling is everything that's wrong with his world," Mrs. Blackwood said firmly. "She's calculating, ambitious, and absolutely ruthless. When she left him, she didn't just break his heart. She shattered his ability to trust his own judgment about people. He's probably terrified that she's right about you being a rebound." "Maybe I am," Clementine whispered. "Child, I've been watching that man for 15 years. I saw him with her, and I've seen him with you. With her, he was trying to be someone he thought he should be. With you, he's the man he actually is. There's a world of difference." "Then why didn't he defend us? Why didn't he tell her she was wrong?" Mrs. Blackwood sighed. "Because men, even good ones, can be spectacularly stupid when confronted with their past mistakes. Give him time to remember who he really is when he's not being manipulated by a professional. What if he chooses her? Then he's a fool and you'll know you deserve better. But I don't think he will. That man has been happier these past weeks than I've ever seen him. He's not going to throw that away for someone who already proved she doesn't value what matters." As Mrs. Blackwood left, Clementine sat alone with her tea and her racing thoughts. Outside her window, the gardens they'd restored together bloomed in the afternoon sun, beautiful and alive and testament to what they could create when they worked as partners. But gardens required constant care. And sometimes even the most beautiful relationships needed defending against the weeds that threatened to choke out love. The question was, would Atticus remember that in time? Or would Vivian's poison prove stronger than everything they'd grown together? As the sun set over Thornfield, Clementine made a decision. She wasn't going to wait around to be chosen or discarded. She was going to fight for what they had. After all, she'd learned from the best gardener she knew. Sometimes the most precious plants needed the fiercest protection to survive. In the end, love isn't about choosing the most beautiful flower in the garden. It's about choosing the one whose roots intertwine so deeply with yours that pulling them apart would destroy everything you've grown together. The next morning, Clementine woke before dawn with the fierce determination of someone who had decided to stop being afraid. She dressed carefully, not in her usual work clothes but in the sundress Magnolia had insisted she pack, the one that made her feel confident and beautiful and worthy of fighting for love. She found Atticus in his grandmother's garden, sitting on the old stone bench they'd restored together, staring at the sunrise with the expression of a man wrestling with his own soul. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady despite her hammering heart. He looked up and she saw everything in his eyes: confusion, guilt, longing, and something that looked suspiciously like relief that she was there. "Clementine, No," she interrupted, moving to stand directly in front of him. "I get to go first. Because yesterday I let someone else define what I'm worth, and I'm not doing that anymore." Atticus opened his mouth to speak, but she held up a hand. "I heard what she said. About me being quaint. About this being a rebound, about you never being able to love someone like me the way you loved her. And you know what? She's right about one thing. You can't love me the way you loved her." Pain flashed across his features, and he started to stand, but Clementine stepped closer, her hands coming up to frame his face. "You can't love me the way you loved her because what we have is completely different. What you had with her was performance, expectation, trying to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. What we have is real, messy, honest, built with dirty hands and patient hearts, and the faith that broken things can bloom again." "Clementine," he whispered, his hands covering hers. "I'm not her, Atticus. I'm never going to be elegant at charity galas or know which fork to use at fancy dinners or fit seamlessly into your world of business meetings and society pages. But I know how to love you. I know how to see the man you are when you're not trying to be what everyone expects. I know how to make you laugh, how to challenge you, how to stand beside you while we create something beautiful together." Tears were sliding down her cheeks now, but her voice remained strong. "So here's my question. Do you want a woman who looks perfect beside you, or do you want a partner who helps you grow into the best version of yourself? Because I can't be both. I can only be me. And if that's not enough..." Atticus silenced her with a kiss that was desperate, grateful, and full of every emotion he'd been too scared to voice. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "God, I'm an idiot," he said shakily. "The biggest, most spectacular idiot who ever lived." "Probably," Clementine agreed with a watery smile. "But you're my idiot, if you want to be." "I sent her away," he said urgently. "Last night, after I realized what I'd done, what I'd let her make me doubt. I told her she was right. I can't love you the way I loved her, because what I feel for you is deeper, truer, more real than anything I ever felt for her. She was who I thought I wanted. You're who I actually need. Atticus, marry me," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out like he couldn't contain them anymore. "I know it's crazy, I know we've only known each other for 2 months, but I can't imagine my life without you. Marry me, and we'll restore every garden on this property. Marry me, and we'll plant seeds and watch them grow and create something beautiful together. Marry me, and I promise to spend every day proving that you're not a rebound or a convenience. You're the love of my life." Clementine stared at him, her heart doing impossible acrobatics in her chest. "Are you seriously proposing to me in your grandmother's garden while I'm crying and probably have mascara streaked down my face?" "Yes," he said, laughing through his own tears. "Because this is where I learned what love looks like. And this is where I fell in love with you. And this is where I want to promise you forever." "Well, when you put it like that," she said, throwing her arms around his neck. "Yes. Yes, yes, absolutely yes." The kiss that followed was interrupted by the sound of applause from the garden path. They broke apart to find Pete Murphy, Mrs. Blackwood, Marco, and Ruby, all watching with enormous grins. "About bloody time," Pete called out. The roses were starting to wilt from the anticipation. "I may have told them where to find you," Mrs. Blackwood admitted with a completely unrepentant smile. "Some moments are too important to happen without witnesses." "Also," Marco added, producing a bottle of champagne from behind his back, "I may have prepared for this eventuality." A chef always knows when love is ready to bloom. As they celebrated with champagne and laughter in the garden where Atticus had first learned about love, Clementine's phone buzzed with a text from Magnolia. Status report. Did you fight for your man, or do I need to drive up there with bail money? Clementine showed the text to Atticus, who laughed and took the phone from her hands to type a response. She fought, she won, and we're engaged. You might want to start planning a wedding. The lucky idiot who gets to marry your best friend. The phone rang immediately, and Magnolia's shriek of joy was so loud that several birds launched themselves from nearby trees. 2 years later, the best gardens, like the best love stories, are never really finished. They just keep growing, season after season, year after year, always becoming more beautiful with time. Clementine Blackthorne, she still got a thrill every time she saw her new name, stood in the doorway of the conservatory, watching her husband teach their 6-month-old daughter Iris the names of different orchids. At 6 months, baby Iris was more interested in trying to eat the flowers than learning about them, but Atticus didn't seem to mind. And this one is a phalaenopsis, which means moth orchid in Greek, he was saying seriously to the baby, who responded by blowing a raspberry and grabbing for his nose. Very good point, Iris. The etymology is indeed questionable. She's definitely going to be a gardener, Clementine said, moving to join them. She's already showing excellent plant instincts. Or she'll rebel completely and become an accountant, Atticus replied, kissing Clementine's temple as she settled beside them on the conservatory bench. Either way, she'll be perfect. The conservatory had been transformed over the past 2 years into something that was both beautiful and functional. Part tropical paradise, part practical growing space, part family sanctuary. It was where they'd had their first real conversation about the future, where Atticus had proposed, officially with a ring that incorporated tiny flowers from his grandmother's garden, and where they'd spend quiet mornings like this one, just being a family. Magnolia called this morning, Clementine said, adjusting baby Iris's tiny sun hat. She's bringing someone to the garden party next week, someone she's cautiously optimistic about. Poor man, Atticus said with mock sympathy. He has no idea what he's walking into. Are you kidding? After watching us fall in love, Magnolia has become convinced she's an expert matchmaker. She's been trying to set up half of New York. The garden party in question was their 2nd annual celebration of what they'd started calling Garden Day, the anniversary of the day Clementine had first arrived at Thornfield. It had become a tradition, a way to celebrate not just their love story, but all the beauty they'd created together. The estate grounds were now spectacular, a perfect blend of formal elegance and natural wildness that attracted garden lovers from across the country. They'd even started offering workshops and garden tours, with all proceeds going to community gardening programs in underserved neighborhoods. But the most beautiful transformation wasn't in the gardens at all. It was in the man beside her who'd learned to trust love again, to believe in beautiful things that last, to understand that the best growth happens when you're brave enough to put down roots. Do you ever regret it? Atticus asked suddenly, a question he still posed sometimes as if he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. Giving up your old life? Taking a chance on a grumpy recluse with trust issues? Clementine looked around the conservatory, at the thriving plants and the beautiful chaos of their life together, at their daughter who was now attempting to have a conversation with a butterfly. She thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, struggling, searching, hoping for something she couldn't even name. Never, she said firmly, then grinned. Although I do think we should add former grumpy recluse to your business cards. It has a nice ring to it. Clementine Blackthorne, Atticus said, pulling her closer for a kiss that still made her toes curl. I love you more than all the flowers in all the gardens in the world. Even more than your grandmother's roses? Even more than my grandmother's roses. As if summoned by the mention of roses, a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers through the conservatory, and baby Iris clapped her hands in delight, as if she understood that she was growing up in a place where love stories bloom eternal and happily ever afters are tended with patient hands and faithful hearts. Outside, the gardens of Thornfield stretched in every direction, wild and wonderful, carefully planned and beautifully chaotic, a living testament to the truth that the most magnificent things happen when love takes root and is given room to grow. And in the conservatory where it all began, the Blackthorne family sat surrounded by flowers and possibilities, knowing that their love story was just like the best gardens, never really finished, always growing, and becoming more beautiful with each passing season. The end.